Kendrick Lamar just watched Drake unload 3 full projects in one night like a man trying to force the culture to remember who he used to be. 40-plus songs, multiple direct shots, subliminals stacked on top of subliminals, a giant rollout in Toronto, the CN Tower glowing like a villain headquarters, live streams, teasers, leaks, timestamp records, the whole internet locked in waiting for some kind of nuclear comeback moment. And yet somehow, after all of that noise, the loudest thing surrounding this entire situation is still Kendrick Lamar's silence. No tweet, no Instagram story, no cryptic caption, no loading post, no surprise freestyle at midnight, nothing. And if you've been paying attention to hip-hop long enough, that silence starts feeling dangerous. Because the last time Drake kept talking while Kendrick went quiet, the result changed the entire balance of rap culture. That's not exaggeration either. People forget just how untouchable Drake looked before 2024. We're talking about a guy who spent over a decade dominating streaming, radio, playlists, charts, clubs, memes, social media, and basically every measurable corner of music. Drake wasn't just winning, Drake felt permanent. Then Kendrick Lamar flipped the entire conversation upside down in a matter of days, and now here we are again. Drake finally returns after 2 years of carrying the biggest public loss of his career on his back, and instead of fully moving forward, he spends huge chunks of his comeback album cycle still addressing Kendrick Lamar, still throwing shots, still trying to reopen wounds, still trying to challenge the narrative that was created after Not Like Us became bigger than the beef itself. That tells you something immediately. Nobody spends that much energy talking about somebody who didn't affect them. The crazy part is Drake actually sounds good on Iceman. That's what makes this whole thing complicated. This isn't a lazy album. This isn't a washed performance. Drake is rapping with hunger again. There's aggression in his delivery that people haven't heard in years. The writing feels tighter. The energy feels focused. Even critics who don't like Drake are admitting the man sounds motivated again. But motivation and victory are two different things. And the deeper you really look at this whole situation, the more obvious it becomes that Kendrick may have already won the war in a way that no diss track can undo. To really understand why this moment matters so much, though, you gotta go all the way back before the lawsuits, before the Grammys, before the Super Bowl, before Like That, before Push-Ups, before Euphoria. Back when Drake and Kendrick weren't enemies at all. Back in 2011, Kendrick Lamar was still climbing. He was respected in hip-hop circles, but he wasn't the global force he would eventually become. Drake, meanwhile, was already ascending into superstardom. Take Care was one of the most anticipated rap albums in the world at the time, and Drake did something interesting on that album. He gave Kendrick Lamar an entire interlude, not a small feature, not a quick 16 bars, an actual solo moment. Buried Alive interlude felt like Drake publicly co-signing Kendrick as the future that matters because Drake rarely positioned people beside him unless he saw value in them. At that time, the energy between them genuinely looked like mutual respect. Two elite artists moving side by side, different styles, different personalities, but both clearly destined to become defining rappers of their era. For a while, that's exactly what happened. Drake became the commercial king, Kendrick became the lyrical prophet, Drake mastered accessibility, Kendrick mastered artistic weight. One artist gave the culture constant output, the other made people wait carefully between statements. They represented opposite philosophies, but both were respected. Then came 2013, and hip-hop has honestly never fully recovered from what happened after that. Big Sean drops control. Kendrick Lamar delivers the verse that shook the industry. He starts naming names. Drake, Cole, Meek Mill, Mac Miller, Big Crit, everybody. But the important thing is Kendrick wasn't speaking from a place of personal hatred back then. He sounded competitive, hungry, obsessed with proving himself as the best rapper alive. The famous "I'm trying to murder you" energy wasn't personal yet. But Drake clearly took some of it personally anyway. You could feel the temperature change after that verse. Interviews got slightly colder. Subliminals started appearing more frequently. Little comments, tiny bars, indirect shots. Nothing explosive yet, but the friendship energy slowly disappeared. For years, the tension stayed hidden beneath the surface. Fans debated whether the rivalry was even real. Drake would publicly downplay it. Kendrick rarely addressed it directly, but if you really listen carefully, both artists kept circling each other. Then J. Cole accidentally detonated the bomb that finally pushed everything over the edge. First-person shooter sounded harmless at first. Cole calling himself Drake and Kendrick. The big three seemed like a celebration. Three giants sharing the throne, but Kendrick clearly hated the idea of shared placement. To Kendrick, being grouped together felt disrespectful. He didn't want co-ownership of the crown. He wanted complete separation. That's why Like That hit so hard. Motherfuck the big three, it's just big me. That line instantly shifted the culture. Suddenly, this wasn't subtle anymore. Kendrick wasn't hinting. He was declaring war openly. And the biggest mistake people made at the time was assuming Kendrick was just doing competitive rap talk. No, Kendrick sounded calculated, like somebody who already knew exactly how far he intended to take things. Drake answered. Of course, that's what Drake does. He's always been willing to engage. Push-ups came with jokes, confidence, and disrespect. Drake leaned into humor the way he usually does during rap battles, calling Kendrick short, mocking his contracts, questioning his status. The internet loved it initially because Drake sounded comfortable. Then he dropped tailor-made made freestyle. That's where everything started tilting sideways. Using AI-generated Tupac vocals against Kendrick Lamar was one of the strangest strategic moves in rap beef history. Not because it lacked shock value, it definitely got attention, but because it misunderstood how Kendrick is perceived culturally. Kendrick had spent years positioning himself as somebody deeply connected to hip-hop tradition, West Coast history, and artistic integrity. Using Tupac's recreated voice to attack him felt disrespectful in a way that instantly backfired. The backlash was immediate. Tupac's estate stepped in. Legal pressure arrived fast. Drake had to remove the track, and once that happened, the aura shifted. For the first time during the battle, Drake looked rattled. Then Kendrick dropped Euphoria, and hip-hop changed overnight. Euphoria didn't sound rushed. It sounded prepared. That's what scared people. Kendrick rapped like somebody who had been organizing thoughts for years. No catchy hook, no radio structure, just relentless breakdowns of Drake's identity, behavior, insecurities, relationships, public image, and cultural positioning. It felt surgical. The scary thing wasn't just the bars, it was the tone. Kendrick sounded disgusted, not competitive, not playful. Disgusted, that changed how people interpreted the entire beef. Suddenly fans weren't watching two rappers exchange witty insults anymore. They were watching Kendrick try to completely dismantle Drake's public identity, and Kendrick didn't stop there. 616 in LA dropped almost immediately after, keeping pressure on Drake non-stop. Then Drake answered with Family Matters, arguably one of the strongest records he released during the entire battle. He came aggressive, personal, focused. The accusations were heavy. Domestic abuse allegations, questions about Kendrick's family, questions about loyalty. For a brief moment, it felt like Drake might regain control, then Kendrick dropped Meet the Grams 20 minutes later. That timing changed everything, because it made Kendrick look 5 steps ahead. Meet the Grams wasn't even structured like a traditional diss record. It sounded like psychological warfare. Kendrick addressing Drake's mother, father, son, and family members directly created an atmosphere that felt deeply uncomfortable. The accusations escalated dramatically. The tone became darker, more sinister, and before the culture could even fully process that record, Kendrick hit again with Not Like Us. That's when the battle stopped being a rap beef and became a cultural phenomenon. Not Like Us was genius because Kendrick weaponized fun. Drake had built an empire off making music people replayed socially. Club records, meme records, summer records, but Kendrick somehow created a diss track that functioned exactly the same way. People danced to it, people screamed the lyrics in crowds, people played it at parties. That should never happen at that scale during a rap battle, but Kendrick pulled it off anyway. The certified lover boy, certified pedophile line instantly became one of the most viral moments in modern rap history. Whether people agreed with the accusations or not almost stopped mattering. The chant itself became cultural currency, and Drake never fully recovered from that momentum swing. Drake tried one final response with The Heart Part 6, attempting to deny allegations and reframe the situation, but by then the energy had already escaped his control. Public perception had shifted too hard. Kendrick wasn't just winning bars anymore, he was winning moments. Then came the pop-out concert in Los Angeles. And honestly, that event felt less like a rap performance and more like a public coronation. Kendrick performing Not Like Us multiple times in front of a packed arena full of celebrities, athletes, West Coast legends, and screaming fans created an image Drake could never erase. The entire city looked united behind Kendrick. LeBron was there. Mustard was there. The energy felt historic. By the time Kendrick performed the song again and again, the message became clear. This wasn't temporary internet hype anymore. The culture had officially chosen a side. Then the Grammys happened. That's where things crossed into territory nobody expected. A diss track winning Record of the Year and Song of the Year felt unreal. Hip-hop battles traditionally lived inside rap culture. Suddenly Kendrick's victory had become institutional. The industry itself validated the record, 5 Grammys. Every category won complete domination. And if that wasn't enough, Kendrick then performed at the Super Bowl halftime show in front of one of the largest TV audiences imaginable, hearing an entire stadium scream lyrics connected to Drake's humiliation on the biggest entertainment stage in America felt almost impossible to comprehend. That's why Drake's current situation feels so complicated, because he's not just battling Kendrick anymore. He's battling memory. The images are already burned into culture. The Grammys, the Super Bowl, the pop-out, the viral chants, the memes, the reactions, the endless online discourse. You can't erase moments that large with regular diss bars. That's the real issue Drake is dealing with on Iceman. And yet, instead of fully pivoting into a fresh era musically, he keeps circling back to Kendrick throughout the project. That's what people immediately noticed. The bars are sharper now, but the obsession still exists on multiple songs. Drake references streaming allegations, trying to imply Kendrick's massive numbers during the battle weren't entirely organic. He brings up disappearing streams, bot accusations, artificial inflation theories. The problem is those arguments never fully landed publicly because Kendrick's success extended far beyond streaming. You can question numbers online. You can't fake a stadium screaming your lyrics at the Super Bowl. That's why those bars feel weaker than Drake probably intended. Then Drake attacks Kendrick's conscious image. This is probably the most strategically interesting angle he takes on the album because he's trying to undermine Kendrick's authenticity directly. He basically paints Kendrick as somebody whose audience is filled with privileged white listeners consuming guilt-driven activism music while Kendrick performs symbolic charity gestures for cameras before retreating into celebrity life. On paper, it's actually a dangerous angle. The issue is Drake himself probably isn't the ideal messenger for that criticism. For years, critics accused Drake of borrowing regional styles, accents, slang, aesthetics, and cultural identities depending on whichever sound was trending. So when Drake questions somebody else's authenticity, the internet naturally pushes back harder. That's why so many reactions to Iceman feel conflicted. People admit Drake is rapping well, but they also feel like he's arguing uphill against a narrative that already hardened against him. Then there's the owl references. Kendrick turned the OVO owl into a symbol during the beef. The caged owl imagery in Not Like Us stuck psychologically because it represented Drake appearing trapped, cornered, vulnerable. Drake trying to reclaim that imagery on Iceman makes sense strategically, but it also accidentally keeps Kendrick's symbolism alive. That's the weird paradox Drake is stuck inside right now. Every attempt to fight the narrative keeps reminding people the narrative exists, and that's why Kendrick's silence matters so much, because silence changes the power dynamic completely. If Kendrick immediately responded, Drake would regain direct engagement. The battle would feel active again. Iceman would suddenly become chapter 1 of a new war, instead of chapter 20 of an old one, but Kendrick refusing to engage creates a different image entirely. It makes Drake look like somebody still arguing about a fight the public already scored. That's brutal, psychologically, especially because Kendrick's post-beef career trajectory has only strengthened his position. GNX succeeded without needing to obsess over Drake. The world tour sold massively. Critics praised Kendrick's artistry. His legacy conversations grew stronger. Meanwhile, Drake's biggest headlines still keep circling back toward Kendrick-related tension. Even this current rollout proves it. Think about that for a second. Drake drops over 40 songs, and the main internet conversation still becomes, what is Kendrick going to do? That's not dominance, that's orbiting another artist's gravity. Now, to be fair, Drake absolutely still has enormous influence. Anybody pretending Drake suddenly became irrelevant after the beef is lying. The man remains one of the biggest artists on earth. His catalog is untouchable historically. From Take Care to Nothing was the same to If You're Reading This, It's Too Late. Drake's run shaped an entire generation of rap and pop music. That legacy doesn't disappear because of one battle, but battles still matter in hip-hop, and Kendrick understood that better than almost anybody. That's why his approach was so devastating. He didn't just try to out-rap Drake technically. He attacked identity, perception, credibility, and cultural positioning simultaneously. He made the conversation emotional instead of purely lyrical. Once that happened, Drake was never fighting only bars anymore. He was fighting symbolism. That's much harder to beat. And now the culture sits in this strange waiting period where everybody expects Kendrick to eventually respond, even though silence might actually be the strongest move available to him. The funniest part is the fake fireman rumor accidentally proved this perfectly. A completely fictional Kendrick response album generated massive excitement instantly. People were refreshing timelines, making theories, posting fake track lists, analyzing fake screenshots. The anticipation alone became bigger than half the real conversations surrounding Iceman. That level of anticipation is power. Kendrick barely has to move anymore for the culture to react. Meanwhile, Drake is actively campaigning for attention through live streams, bars, visuals, and rollout strategies. Again, that doesn't mean Drake failed musically. It just means perception currently favors Kendrick so heavily that even strong material struggles to fully reverse momentum. And momentum matters more in rap battles than people admit, because once the audience emotionally decides somebody won, every future interaction gets filtered through that lens. That's exactly what's happening now. Every Drake diss gets interpreted as coping. Every Kendrick silence gets interpreted as confidence. Whether fair or unfair, that's the framework dominating discussion. And honestly, Kendrick probably understands this perfectly. That's why a response track may never come. Not because Kendrick can't respond, not because he's scared, but because strategically responding might actually lower his position. Right now, Kendrick occupies the role of somebody who already closed the chapter. Somebody who already achieved complete victory and moved forward artistically while Drake remains emotionally stuck, revisiting the damage. That image benefits Kendrick massively. Breaking silence risks disrupting that advantage, especially because expectations are now impossible. How do you top Not Like Us culturally? How do you top the Grammys? How do you top the Super Bowl? How do you top making an entire stadium scream lyrics attacking your rival? Anything less than that that would automatically feel smaller. Kendrick already reached the mountaintop of rap beef spectacle. There may literally be nowhere higher to go, so instead he stays silent, and every extra day that passes without a response makes Drake's bars echo louder into empty space. That's the uncomfortable reality sitting underneath all of this. Iceman sounds like a talented artist trying to reclaim control of a story that already escaped him, and Kendrick's silence sounds like somebody fully aware he doesn't need to say another word because the culture already memorized the ending.